Don't get me wrong, corporate wasn't all bad. I don't want to paint corporate as the boogeyman, but I'm not going to paint it as your friend, especially for those of you that have that calling to do your own thing. You know what I'm talking about. The linear path is gone. That is an idea of yesterday. That is our parents' playbook. That is no longer applicable in this market. And I say that as a warning that you have to stay ready and don't feel guilty for having an exit plan. I realize I want to address maybe an assumption, an easy assumption today about corporate to calling. And a lot of people assume because that is my platform that I've been in corporate all my life and now in entrepreneurship, but that is not the case. The thing about my corporate tenure is that because I was an early entrepreneur, I went into corporate and was able to, I like to say, take the elevator. I wasn't on the ladder. I skyrocketed in corporate and I attribute that, hindsight is our best teacher. I attribute that to all the things that I learned as an early entrepreneur. I want to share a strategy that was effective in both uh, in my entrepreneurial role, which I'll dive into, and I later used that in my corporate setting. And I call it a career snowball. Because if you think about a snowball rolling down a hill, it starts small, and then the more momentum it goes, you end up with a huge snowball at the bottom of the hill. That's where I'm going with this. I didn't start in corporate. Before I even went into corporate, I had nearly 2 decades of entrepreneurial background in my toolkit. I started off, I had a certificate straight out of high school, and I utilized that to become a operator in the beauty industry, which led me to become an owner operator where I opened up a salon, and that is where I learned the business of people. Now, my corporate people definitely understand, for those of you either inside or past corporate, you understand the business of people. This is what I would equate to how you can see someone maybe be promoted that, there were 3 or 4 other candidates that should have got that job. That person usually has mastered the business of people. Let's keep it real. That person has understood who and where the decision makers play, and they understand that they may not have the talent, but they have filled the gap with networking and politicking and all the coffee conversations and water cooler conversations that need to be had to elevate their career. That is the business of people, understanding the dynamic of people. And I learned that very early because I was in an intimate industry of being a beauty professional. Think about the people that you rely on for your service. There's no more intimate setting than having someone do your hair, right? I became the psychologist. I had to make on the spot decisions. I had to make decisions for people when they were undecided. That was a huge thing. It was their identity. It's the first thing people see. So as an early entrepreneur, I picked up these skills that I later found out were gold in corporate, and I knew how to play the game. When it came to hierarchy and organizational charts and all that, I bypassed all that. For those of you that know my story, when I entered corporate, I took a role I was underqualified for, and 3 years later, my salary skyrocketed 177%. Here's the 5 step of a career snowball that I believe that you all will find valuable. Please let me know. I think you all will find it valuable because here's the step. I started off as an operator. I became my owner. And one of the more interesting steps is I actually made a lateral move to being a distributor, then turned what we would say a bridge into educator administrator. And I need you all to follow me with this because this will matter for you that are currently in corporate or trying to figure out, okay, I'm out of corporate. Now what do I do? Because I recognize both of those spaces. I made all these moves in one industry, all before I ever stepped into a corporate role. And it wasn't random. I consider it an on ramp, if you will. And when I left corporate after, spending a tenure there, maybe 8 years, I followed the same pattern out. If it's not broke, we're not going to fix it. You follow me? And this is in a book, E-Myth Revisited, is that a lot of people think they're masters of their trade, but when it comes to building their own table, that level of ownership, what got you there won't necessarily take you to the next level of being a master of your trade. As an operator, I was hands-on beauty professional. And when I started to build out my first business, that was a learning curve that will spank you to the highest degree, monetarily, time-wise, resource-wise. This is why I'm an advocate for having a mentor, an expert, or just somebody that's been there and been successful at it, because it'll save you time, it'll save you money, and it'll save you headache. I just wanted to bring this to forefront because, like I said, I think this is something that we all can utilize no matter what stage of your career that you're in. Each role taught me a different dimension of business. I was the executor as an operator. As an owner, this is where you turn into the visionary. And for some people, that's uncomfortable because they're always used to doing, doing, doing. As an owner, your job is to lead the vision. When I made a lateral move to distributor early on in my career, what I did was utilize and leverage my network because I had built a network of other professionals in my industry. And through my travels and through my education, I had partnered with people that didn't have a line of business in the area I served, and I saw opportunity. So I became a distributor by default because my network had already cultivated that. This is why you got to go outside. For my work from home people, you got to go outside. I talked about that in my last live, the power in proximity. I leveraged my network and I started to sell products exclusive to industry professionals. I literally learned logistics and I didn't know I was learning logistics. And that became a major player as I moved on into corporate. I'll tell you why in just a minute. After maybe a decade in corporate, things started to change, family dynamics. People started to see the value that I had with the tenure that I had, and I became an educator. I went from operator to owner, leading the vision for other up and coming professionals and providing a platform for them to do what I had done. Then I became a distributor based on the power of my network, because that means that sales were waiting for me because I had the credibility and I had the people wanting what I had exclusive right to. Right? These aren't huge leaps. These are what I call leapfrogs. This is how you leverage these lateral moves. And this is the power of a career snowball. Now, when you move in the educator realm, and I'll circle back to this because for those of you that are looking to exit corporate, this is usually the lane that most people, it's either going to be distributor, where you're leveraging your network, your resources, your skills, or you're going to go into the influence educator, where you are showing somebody something that perhaps you were at that place 5 and 10 years ago. The fancy title is consultancy, advisory. Those are leapfrog moves that I think a lot of us think it has to be hard and we have to recreate the wheel, and you don't. Utilize what you already have. For those of you that have been tapped in with me since I've been on Substack and maybe I met you on YouTube, you have heard me mention corporate currency because right now I support corporate professionals that are bridging out of corporate and starting their own entrepreneurial pathway. And I define that sweet spot as leveraging corporate currency, which is the skills that you already hone, your background and experience. It's at the intersection of what lights you up. I was good as an operator and I enjoyed it. I love to make people feel good. So it lit me up. But the third thing of leveraging corporate currency and defining your career sweet spot, not what's going to work for everybody else, but defining your career sweet spot is, will the market pay you for it? I think that is the most underrated piece that people leave. They have the passion. Passion is fuel, but passion is fleeting. When passion starts to wither down, when you got to roll up your sleeves and do the work, what will you rely on? You'll rely on what comes natural to you, which is your skills, your resources, your background. But you'll also rely on, you have defined a profitable path. You've done the homework, the research, you've tested, you've validated that. That'll get you through. Because I just made a note here on Substack. Purpose is where you go back to when you're feeling heavy, when you're like, okay, what am I doing? And for those of you that have the call of entrepreneurship, it likely should be bigger than you. What is your impact? What is your influence? Because these are the things that you have to revisit when you can't find the motivation within. Then you make it about the greater good. And I don't want to get on here sounding woo-woo, but it is the absolute truth. For me, my hunger in entrepreneurship, which is where you have to ride the ups and downs. You don't have a salary to depend on. My hunger came from knowing that I was a mother, my family dynamic, and also just knowing that I chose a route less traveled as an entrepreneur. I was a straight A student. My pathway should have been a 4-year college, but I didn't want that. The call to say, okay, you chose this path, you better own it. So it was bigger than me. It became about the stability for my family and also owning the path that I chose. You have to revisit that because passion is fleeting. The good thing about me being an early entrepreneur prior to going into corporate, the great thing was the freedom and the flexibility. And I so craved that while I was in corporate. Don't get me wrong, corporate wasn't all bad. I don't want to paint corporate as the boogeyman, but I'm not going to paint it as your friend, especially for those of you that have that calling to do your own thing. You know what I'm talking about. It's sometimes it's undescribable. When you have reached a level of success, a lot of my clients, they suffer from success guilt. They should be grateful is what they tell themselves. They should be thankful. They don't want to let others down that cheered them on along the way, but they're not fulfilled. And they're at that crossroads. And a lot of people stay there for many, many, many moons because it's such a heavy decision. For those that had went to acquire higher education, perhaps invested 4, 5, 6 years in education, and you get to the top of this mountain that you ideally in your head, was supposed to be so great, and you get there and you're like, what's going on? This is not what they said it was going to be. This is not what I thought it was going to be. I've been guilty of that. When I was an early entrepreneur, successful, six-figure successful year over year, when I was an early entrepreneur, for some reason, I had it in my idea that a level of success looked like a briefcase. It looked like a boardroom. It looked like a prestigious company. It looked like a community of people taking vacations and having conferences. It's so ironic as hindsight, what I was actually living and doing. People were scrambling to get to my side of reality. And I'm looking at their side of reality and wanting to get. So my perception of corporate before I entered the pool, it pulled me there. I didn't enter corporate because I failed at entrepreneurship. I wanted to learn. I wanted to challenge myself. My family dynamic had changed to allow me to call for a little bit more perceived structure. Now, we know in this day and times, corporate stability is almost out the window. I mean, this is the reason why my platform is growing exponentially. You see the headlines, that perception of what success was supposed to be. When I got to corporate, I realized, okay, the next level, I don't want anything to do with that. I had utilized my entrepreneurial background to successfully navigate all the crap that's inside corporate, all the politicking, utilize all that. And when I got there, I said, I don't even want to climb this ladder. My ladder is up against the wrong wall. So when I exited corporate, I utilized the same thing. I returned back. I like to say I boomerang back, but I used the same layered approach. Guess what I had? Because there's one thing about, for those of us, raise your hand if you're middle age over 40, like myself here. The one thing when you hit that middle age and you're tenured, you don't have time to play. Now, I had some experimental years in my early 20s. I felt like I had time on my side. But one thing about being middle age is time is your most valuable asset. So when I chose to exit corporate and return back to the love, to the love of my life, which is entrepreneurship, the freedom, the autonomy, the flexibility, the accountability, I ended up getting on a 15-minute Zoom where I heard the phrase, and some of you may have heard it, we're going in a different direction. That was just after I had closed a $1 million logistic contract, but I'll save that for another line. That's a way to treat success. When the gate opened and God said, you know what, this is in your destiny to go back to being an entrepreneur. I used the same strategy that I used that worked for me as an early entrepreneur. I used that same strategy to bridge out. Don't get me wrong, there's layers of emotion you have to peel back. For those of you that have not read my post, The Deeper Work, all of those emotions, you can prepare your way to the moon. But all of those emotions, to unlearn and unwrap that corporate packaging on you, you got to give yourself some grace. I'm here to talk about what I call the career snowball. It's an unconventional path. I hear the term portfolio career. Here's the thing about portfolio career. It sets the tone like everything was intentional. I'm going to call out some people here, especially on LinkedIn every day. I'm calling out some people. Portfolio career sounds very intentional, but I guarantee for those that are middle age, it's a messy path and you just ended up there. How many people have 4-year degrees and that are actually working in that degree? I'll wait. The portfolio career, I like to debunk that. We'll just call it a career snowball because the linear path is gone. That is the idea of yesterday. That is our parents' playbook. That is no longer applicable in this market. And I say that as a warning that you have to stay ready and don't feel guilty for having an exit plan. As a matter of fact, I am turning the tide to support organizations, to support them in building entrepreneurial pathways for their existing and their exiting employees. Because the reality is, people are planning things behind your back if you're a corporate leader anyway. Why not become part of the party? That's what I'm doing on the organization side, is just supporting people. If you know your organization is growing organically, or you have to scale different, or AI is allowing you to do more with less people, that's fine. But I want to support organizations. Give your people a bridge out to where they can pursue and provide impact for others in an entrepreneurial capacity. Today, we're talking about using the career snowball. I don't say portfolio career. I say career snowball. It's because it's what you do when you take all of the things and all of the gingerbread crumbs along the way, intentional and unintentional, and you bring that together and you utilize that in an entrepreneurial capacity. For those of you that are in corporate, I need you to listen for the next couple of minutes because I want to give you some nuggets here. At every stage, both in my early entrepreneurial journey and later in corporate, I created bridge projects. I was an early beauty professional and I utilized my network and my proximity. I started selling products to other beauty professionals. That's leveraging network. I became an educator in the field. That is influencing those that are years behind you. These are not side hustles. These are layering. I like the term bridge projects because it's taking you from this point, using what you have and what you're doing, and it's almost effortlessly bringing in a profitable pathway to your next and your best moves. The projects that looked like I was just doing my job, they were actually teaching me at the next level. Don't let that go over your head. When things are natural to you, that doesn't mean that's natural for somebody else. These are the things that I unpack inside the professionals that I coach in their exit strategy, is that things, high performers are somebody, they're another breed. Things that are so natural to them, they take almost for granted because they've been doing it. They can do it with their eyes closed. They can do it with their hands behind their back. But everybody doesn't have your gift. And once you realize that and you take yourself outside of the process, this is how you position yourself profitably because you start to put a name and package and title it. The idea of I was just doing my job. We take that language and we package that and we take that expertise and we position that so you can build your own bridge project. What we're doing now is actually teaching us for the next level, whether you do it intentionally or you find out along the way. Here's the pre-corporate blueprint for the bridge project. I was an operator. I transitioned to owner. From owner, I went to distributor. And then I went into educator. And my bridge to ascension was going into the administrator, overseeing the systems, overseeing the people. These are all things, if you're an emerging entrepreneur or existing, these are all steps that you can apply because some of the stuff you have to leave behind. Some of us are just too jack of all trades. Some of us are too ingrained in the technical that you can't even delegate your way to a profitable path. There has to be a trust building. And right now with AI and the ability to no other time frame, have somebody on the other side of the world support task while you become the visionary owner. We're talking about bridge projects, operator, owner. There's a transition there. When you go from owner, you go into distribute. This is when you start tapping into your network. This is when you start tapping into the power of proximity. This is where you leverage and you start to multiply systems. I'll give you a layman's term for those of you that aspire to, maybe you're authors, thought leaders. The owner to distribution phase looks like going on podcasts. How? Because when you are appearing as guests on other people's podcasts, you are distributing using their platform, their audience. You are distributing your thought leadership. We got to start thinking out the box. Everything is not so literal. Going from owner to distributor, it could be about visibility, making a collaboration post on Substack, on LinkedIn. When you're going from owner to distributor in this career snowball, Then you become an educator. I'm not going to complicate that. It's basically you can speak based on your years, your tenure, your experience. You can speak like nobody can on what you do. What I do in my advisory is some people need help identifying that because it's so second nature to them. I want to jump to those of you that are still in corporate. Here's a way to think about that. We all get that job description. How many of you have actually went back to that job description while you're in corporate and you're like, they got to be kidding me. I worked at a US Fortune 50. I was in business development and sales, and I was handling logistics contracts during COVID. I literally had freight on the ocean during COVID that could not come in the country. It was crazy. I went back to my job description and I said, there's no way this, there's no way they could even write this up. Those of you that are inside corporate right now, you know you're executing far more than that job description. You've identified pain points and you've built solutions. Even if you cross-pollinate between different siloed departments and bring things and ideas together, that is a skill, ladies and gentlemen. That is a skill. When it comes to bridging out of corporate, which is my specialty, is supporting tenure professionals leaving corporate and deciding that they want to walk their entrepreneurial walk. We're not starting over. We're leveraging. For me, back to entrepreneurship, I didn't just quit with hope. I quit with some power tools, or they may have quit me, but I had already been building runway for months through financial literacy, through upskilling, through identifying what I actually wanted to do, and most importantly, what I wasn't willing to do. For those of you, I want you to use the same layered support. If you're at the operator level, you're a master of your trade. Think about how you started. Can that be packaged up to coach and consult another human being? Can that be positioned to support those that are 5 to 7 years behind you or in a life stage that you are no longer? I just went to a mixer last week, and although my specialty is supporting senior professionals, I went to a mixer last week and I met a group of ladies that oversaw a charter school here where I live of high school students. But they also have a career planning pathway program for high school students exploring entrepreneurship. You see where this is going. Now, yes, I support senior professionals, senior corporate professionals, but I have expertise because of life to pour into young adults at the dawn of their career. I remember being a straight A student and everybody questioning, why aren't you going to a 4-year college? Why are you too smart to be a blue collar worker? From that language, from that, I decided to make a decision. And because of that decision, I was the first time college graduate because entrepreneurship allowed me the freedom and the money to pay for that. I was the first time homeowner, actually top 2 or 3 homeowner as of now, but I made a decision. And pouring into young adults when they have so many pressures, I don't think we realize as middle-aged people how much these young adults have, especially with social media, the noise level it is. I think we have the discernment to shut it off, to filter out. They may not have the tools yet. They have the peer pressure. So if I could utilize my platform to pour into early entrepreneurs and help them mitigate the risk and set expectations, I think my life has afforded me to do that. That conversation wouldn't have happened if I didn't introduce myself as a career advisor supporting professionals leaving corporate to entrepreneurship. The conversation bridged off. Back to the career snowball, how you started at the operator level. Then you move into the owner level, and that's where you really formalize the vision and you start to put systems behind it. For those of you that are on podcasts, on Substack, leaning into content creation, you have ascended to the education level. Great value there because you are the you are the solution to the anti-AI force, meaning that you can do what AI cannot do. AI can't tell your story and they can't live the last 15, 20 years. You have the value that AI cannot produce in this information is everywhere. So you got to know the value in your story. And those are the things that we talk about in my program. Further down the snowball, and those of you exiting corporate and just kind of building out that bridge, that runway to the next level of doing your own thing, is the administrator level. This is when you are delegating. This is when you have the vision, You can repeat and educate others to do the same thing. But this is when it gets bigger than you and you start leaning on system building. You start positioning and packaging your expertise. And this is where you turn it into a profitable path. There's dual benefit to both of these. When you are defining your bridge projects, these are your moves, almost like a 1 foot in, 1 foot out situation. There's a way you have to do that dance to where the organization sees you still can produce value for the organization while you are also producing value for where you're at now and where you're going. Bridge projects, don't look at them. I don't want you to look at them as side hustles because they're so much more valuable than that. They're strategic rehearsals for your next act, if you will. Okay. Of course, you can't follow my exact path, but you can use the same pattern. It's 5 levels. And I'm hammering that down. Operator, owner, distributor, educator, administrator. Again, on the operator side, you do the work, you master the craft. That's where you get competent. If you're in corporate, you execute at the highest level. And then the bridge is you identify that one thing that you can master that translates outside the company. And you start hammering on that thing because you know you're on your way out. Level 2 of the snowball is owner. You take ownership, you're building something, you're creating value. If you're in corporate, you find a bridge project that you can maybe pitch to the company within and start doing that. You may not get a monetary compensation for it, but you're getting muscle and you own the outcome, not just the task, and you build advocacy, witnesses. People are watching. Believe me, people are watching. Level 3 here is the distributor. That's when you scale through others. For those of you that are thought leaders, the perfect example I can give you is leveraging other people's platforms through podcasts, through collaborations, through lives. If you're in corporate, you train others on what you've built and you start creating systems and you document so you can speak to this. You document the process so it doesn't depend on you. If you document it well enough, somebody can come sit in your seat and they can have measurable results based on what you documented. That's how you know. Level 4, your educator. This way you're sharing what you know. Simply, you are sharing what you know. You're building authority and the influence beyond your role. I had an Explorer call with a gentleman, and we were going through the introductions. He was interested in some consulting services as he was navigating his career. He was in the UK. 5 minutes into the phone call, I had learned that he had been following my LinkedIn posts for almost half a year, 6 months. He had already had my book. He was able to recite things and to confirm alignment with things he agreed that will work for him. I was blown away. This was early on when I was consulting. That's when I started to realize the power in platform and educating. You never know who you're impacting. So start creating the content. The final level of the career snowball is when you start designing the systems, leading strategically, building the infrastructure, and delegate for my control people. This is when you start to learn operations, you get into budgets, and you really understand strategic planning. And that goes beyond what's happening within. This is when you start analyzing what the market is telling you. This is when you start to make moves on what the research and the data is telling you. In this snowball strategy that I discussed over these last few minutes today, each level builds on the last. You don't necessarily skip levels. It's a compounding effect. Here's the takeaway. Think about what level you're on and then ask yourself, what's the bridge project, not side hustle? Because remember, we're talking about where you're going. What's the bridge project that moves me to the next level? That's the question I want you to ask yourself. Let me know in the comments, what's the bridge project that is moving you to the next level? Because you're not starting over at each level, you're stacking. I went from beauty professional to Fortune 50 top 1% to building what I teach now, not because I'm special, well, I am, but because I understand patterns. I understand the power of proximity. I understanding being ready before the opportunity comes to you. From operator to owner to distributor to educator to administrator. I did it in the beauty industry. I did it in corporate, and I'm doing it now in my own agency. I want you to use the same framework. And this doesn't matter if you're building it inside of corporate or you've already exited. The career snowball isn't about where you start. It's about how you stack. If you're ready to move, you're not starting over. You're launching from foundation. Most people spend decades trying to build. For those of you that are needing support on your exit strategy, or your next best move. My DMs are open. Send me a DM, drop a comment. Let me know which level are you at right now. Are you operator, owner, distributor, educator, administrator? Let me know in the comments and drop me a DM if you are needing some strategic support. I'm here to serve. All right, you all have a great day. Talk to you later.